read us into closed meeting.
Madam Chair, pursuant to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, I move the board convene a closed meeting for the following purpose: to discuss or consider identified subject matter personnel under section 2.23711A1, in particular staff appointments and changes in positions.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Sharp, for that second.
Mr. Castillo.
Aye.
Ms. Carney.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Rasnick.
Yes.
Mr. Sharp.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Miss Highland.
Oh, Ms. Highland is here. Yes, okay, great.
Yes. All right, let's go to close for a minute. How are you? Dick, how are you? Just as you always say.
I forget it was, there was a comedian and she said,
Very good. You like
"She
that.
told the truth."
I'm telling you, there's something about today.
Something in the water.
Not interview, it must be something technically today.
Something in the water, yes, it's diet.
I know.
All right, so can someone help us reconvene to an open meeting and certify the closed meeting, please?
Madam Chair, I move that the board reconvene to an open meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. And now certify the closed meeting, please.
Madam Chair, whereas the Falls Church Public School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to the affirmative recorded vote in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.23711B of the Code of Virginia requires certification by the school board that such a closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Falls Church Public School Board hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirement by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and two, only such business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Second.
Mr. Castillo.
Aye.
Okay, Ms. Highland.
Yes.
Ms. Carney.
Yes.
Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Rasnick.
Yes.
Mr. Sharp.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. And if everyone would join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda for this evening?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? All right, thank you. The agenda for this evening is adopted. Next item is public comments and requests. Mr. Kimball, do we have any this evening?
We have one written communication that was received by Mr. Sharp, and it's from Hillel Weinberg and concerns, and it's about his concerns about the proposed relocation of Mount Daniel to the City Hall site.
All right, thank you. That'll be entered into the record. The next item this evening is the consent agenda. Mr. Kimball?
Yes. First item is personnel appointments. That the school board approved the following staff appointments for the remainder of the 2012-2013 school year: Aaron O'Boyle, special education teacher, George Mason; Tanner Sewell, paraprofessional, George Mason; and change of position, Emily Donovan from first grade paraprofessional and special education paraprofessional to first grade paraprofessional and PYP coordinator, Mount Daniel. And Gisela Schneider, an increase in part-time position to .375 FTE, special education paraprofessional. And the last item, the 2013 summer daycare fees, that the board approved the 2013 summer daycare fees as presented.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move
I
that we,
request to remove the summer daycare fees item.
All right. We have a motion to remove the summer daycare fee item from the consent agenda. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
All right, fine. And all in favor of removing that from the consent agenda? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we will proceed with the consent agenda without that item, and then we'll come back to that item.
fine if we move it to some point after the superintendent's presentation so we can get that accomplished in time that the public expects it to be. So.
And Ms. Clinton is expected to be here later, so.
All right, that's great. Mr. Kimball, if we can just move that item to the end of the agenda before the superintendent's report, that'll be great. All right, so we have removed that item from the consent agenda.
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as amended.
Thank you, Ms. Highland. Thank you very much. Is there... All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I was going to ask for discussion. I was like, wait, it's a consent agenda. Any opposed? All right, we have adopted the consent agenda personnel items then for this evening. Thanks very much. The next item on our agenda is item 6.01, which is the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 14 budget. Before I turn it over to Dr. Jones, I want to remind my colleagues and the folks in the audience that this year, to prepare the budget, Dr. Jones had a little bit different instruction set from this board than she has had for the past 4, maybe 5 years. The specific instruction the superintendent had was to bring a budget for discussion by the school board that reflected the needs of our school division, not the direction given to us by city council or anything else. We obviously wanted her to bring something responsible to us. So I don't know what she's going to present. I haven't seen it, but I just wanted to frame it by saying we've asked her to bring what our school division needs, no more, no less to us. And with that, Dr. Jones, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be presenting the FY14 budget to the school board as recommended by the superintendent. And what you will find out is this budget, I did listen to the guidance of the school board, and we started the process by meeting with every department, every principal, and really going through a master list of what they thought was most important for their school site or for their department, and really taking all of that into consideration. Our top budget priorities this year, of course, staff. You know, our staff are the heart of our school district in staff compensation and making sure that we can hire and retain, and also making sure that we have adequate staffing in all of our school sites. Teaching and learning, of course, that's the business that we're in, and it's the most important thing that we do, is making sure that we have a high-level curriculum that's innovative, and really allows our children to grow and mature. We also have safety on here this year, so you'll see a little bit of safety because it's always been in our budget, but we really want to point out that safety is a focus for us right now, and making sure that we really hone in on some things that in the past maybe you didn't see as much in the budget. And the budget framework has not changed from where we started last year, and I really loved how we used the 5 pillars to frame every single thing that's in our budget is either supporting the small school mentality, which we know in Falls Church, and we even talked about this during the CIP a little bit the other night. We want to maintain that small school feel is a small city. Having small classrooms. And when we say small, I think it's really important for the community to understand that we're not talking about classes of 15 or classes of 16. Our school board has set policy that is very reasonable. In our early childhood, K-1-2, our policy is 22. And from 3rd grade all the way through our 12th grade, it's 24, which is a really nice class size so that teachers can have an interactive environment. We also, of course, focus on 21st century teaching and learning. This has been a huge focus for us this year, and it will continue to be, and especially in the technology area. Also, readiness to learn. I think this school board knows that you've made such a strong commitment to the summer backpack program, to the weekend program. Outstanding staff, and that's our last pillar, and it's making sure that we can retain and recruit the very, very best that Virginia and in the country has to offer. And this is a budget driven by enrollment growth. And I think that you're going to see that all the way through the budget. Enrollment growth is a challenge for us. The presentation is going to look at revenue and spending history. We're going to look at some of the challenges and the key impacts to FY14. Look inside the budget on a few things that are inside there, and then also an overview of the budget request. First of all, we're going to look at revenue and spending history. And I wanted you first to look at FY13, and I'm going to apologize we can't turn the lights off in here because we are at the CO and it's set up a little bit differently. But the one thing I wanted to point out is our instruction last year was sitting at 72%, and our administration was at 6%. And one thing that we are really trying to do is make sure that we put our dollars where they really count for teachers and for children. And you'll notice this shift to 74% into our instruction, and we've lowered our administrative costs by 2%. And again, that's what we've done last year as well as going into the budget this year. And that's been a real focus for us to make sure that we're putting our money on instruction. This is probably one of I think my favorite slides, in that it really talks about what is the revenue source in percent. And this is just giving you a little bit of history over these last 3 years. When you look at FY12, 13, and 14, you're going to see some shifting in how this budget is funded. It doesn't mean the budget is radically different. It means that how it's funded is different. In FY12, if we look at FY12, our sales tax was up a little bit. We had a strong fund balance. And when we say fund balance, that just means that we were able to save money. If we budgeted for a teacher at $85,000 and we didn't need that teacher, then the next year we were able to help the city fund our budget. We were able to help the city a lot in 12, help the city a lot in FY13. And you're going to see this year, assuming that the requests that we put forward and what we have seen so far, it's going to be lower, the amount that we can help the city this year. The federal, if you look at FY12, when you see the 3 for 3%, that's stimulus money. So when we really look at how we were funded in FY12 and FY13, we had a great deal of help from stimulus and also from our own savings by being extremely prudent. This is our percentage change since FY07. And this graph to me is very telling in that if you look at the top line, we have grown from FY07 by more than 25% in our student population. That's tremendous. But if you look at how we've been funded and the city spending per student, we were on a gradual decline, 8%, 12%, 7%. Our goal is to try to get back in FY14 where we can fund this huge trend line at the top. We simply can't continue to keep enrolling at 25% growth in student population and not actually make sure that we're funding for our kids. And when you look where this FY14 line is, it's not even quite back where we were in 08, and that doesn't take into consideration inflation. So this would actually be a little bit higher had we added the inflation. Some key impacts and challenges, and again, I have this big tree growing just so that everybody really focuses on it. It is student enrollment growth. Student enrollment growth is driving our budget on almost every aspect. We are larger now than ever before in the history of Falls Church, and I think it's really important that people understand that. When we look at our student growth trend, and I know the school board has seen this, but perhaps somebody in the community may not have. It's part of our facilities master planning as well. Our student enrollment, if we look here from 05 to 12, we've added 400 students. That's the size of Mount Daniel. We've added a whole elementary school, if you can think of it in that way. But the part that's really impacting us, and that's why I wanted you to see that graph where it showed the two previous years, in this last 2 years, it's been 200. So 50% of that growth has been last year and this year, which is tremendous. Now on the second slide, what I'm really pointing out is we must start planning for September. We usually set our budget based on this school year. The reality is when we're growing at the rate we're growing, we can't afford to do that anymore because then we're forgetting that another 100 or 120 students are going to show up. This graph actually shows FY13, and by the beginning of next year, we will have added by the size of TJ. That's how much we've grown. And that's another 100 students. The other piece that we're trying to really stay on top of now is this PD means planned development. So we know that next year when Northgate opens in the city, that's going to be another 20 students. And the challenge about this one, if you can think back to when we enrolled, and I always hear people talk about Egypt and how that impacted our system, and that was about 35 to 40 kids. This is 20 students, and you don't know when they're going to come because it depends on when the development opens. So if we have 20 students who actually arrive at Northgate in October or November, the impact can even be more challenging because it's difficult to add a first grade teacher, for instance, if they're all early childhood. So we need to be planning to be over here and make sure we're planning for the children who are going to show up. Hiring for current enrollment. Obviously, this is the biggest aspect in our budget. When we look at our existing enrollment, this means that right now, if we took our kindergartners and we said, you're a first grader, they would have 22 children in their class today. This is without enrolling one more student. If nobody came next year, we would have 22. We're at our max in all of these classes. And when you look over here, it's exactly the same. So we need next year, kindergarten is your outlier because you never know how many kindergartners will show up, but you usually count. Kindergarten's a heavy year for us. And again, Mount Daniel grew 9.5% this year, so it's highly likely that we are expecting a kindergarten teacher. So when you look at the growth, and if we want to stay within our small classes, which is what we advocate and we believe in for instruction and for a great environment, we need 12 new K-8 classroom teachers based on enrollment today. This doesn't count even for what you just saw in the previous graph. We have to have additional staff for growth needs. And this is not something, again, where you have a lot of choice. There are mandates by our standards of quality that we have to adhere to for the state of Virginia. We have to offer finance and economics. Our freshmen this year are required to have that course before they graduate. Next year, there will be another group of freshmen who are required. So we have to get the teacher in place to be able to teach full-time, not as an elective anymore. It's a full-time teacher. We have to increase our assistant principals. And if the actual, coming out of General Assembly, there are some things that have come forward where, and from the State Board of Education, where they actually want to lower that ratio. If they lower that ratio and that actually ends up coming to fruition, we could need another assistant principal before the end of the budget season. Because of the stringent evaluation systems, the state is really advocating that we lower the principal ratio as well, just like we think about for teachers, because we want them in every classroom every week. Part-time speech teacher, that's mandated. Special education teachers, 2 of those. Again, that's mandated by caseload, not only by the state of Virginia, but by the federal government. The TJ Encore teacher, that is a teacher like PE, music, art. Again, teachers are, it's mandated that we give them planned time. When we move those children back to TJ, we must add an Encore teacher. We also need, these are all what we consider critical needs because the state doesn't mandate these for us, but we have to have 2 additional routes next year to plan for September's growth. We know that. We need one right now. And when we look at, we have to add 2 additional drivers to drive the 2 additional routes. Now, the one thing I would like to point out is we did, as an administrative team, everybody that's involved at the site level, our transportation, everybody was around the table. And we went back and even looked at our start times for schools and really had a good look this year. Is there some way that we can get our routes down? Is there another way that we can reconfigure? And 2 buses was, and sticking with the times where we're starting now, was the absolute very best. And we may be moving the pre-K start time in order to make just the 2 routes work. I've had people ask if we change start time in another building, does that help? It actually was going to add 7 routes. And so adding 2 was being very, again, really working with a whole team of staff. Additional food service. We're adding a whole rotation at TJ next year. When we move 5th grade back, they have to have an extra pair of hands in the kitchen. We desperately need a full-time behavioral specialist at our elementary to help our staff. We also need to add 1.5 reading teachers. TJ right now has 1 reading teacher. And when they have almost 700 children next year, 1 reading teacher is not enough. They need another one. Mount Daniel also needs another half-time reading teacher. We also look at our custodial staff, and again, we have a staff that works really, really hard, but we have to add another staff because we're adding 22,000 square feet at TJ. So that's essential for us. When we look at safety and security, this, I believe since our last board meeting, I have to say all my days are running together, but since our last board meeting, I believe we talked about this. We have put a security person at the front desk at Mount Daniel, Thomas Jefferson, and as of today, we added at Mary Ellen Henderson. And in next year, we also want to add at the campus gate, once we are gated, to make sure that we have that extra layer at GM at the gate level. One thing I would like to say about this, because I have people that have said, do we really need it? And I encourage the school board, when you're out at the sites and you're visiting, talk to the office staff. You know, I've been doing this a really long time. I was an elementary principal, I was a secondary principal. We've always had this expectation that a secretary could, deal with a child who had a wounded knee, that they could deal with a child who was sick and get them to the clinic, answer the phone, check people in, and also make sure that we're careful of who's coming in the front door. The reality is we had stretched our staff so thin. And to be honest with you, when we first started the budget process, we started this discussion before we really got into the security issue this year about we've understaffed our office staff. And what we've been able to do now is we've taken this off of our office staff. So they're not having to check people in and really stop people and be aggressive and ask people to sign in so they can actually do their jobs. And that's one of the reasons we added at MEH today, because we have seen instantly that the environment is different and we feel safer. The other thing that I would add is that by going in this route where we have this person, it's more cost effective than if we hired another office person who was still trying to do multitasking. We also don't pay VRS, we don't pay benefits. It's a flat, so it's the most cost effective thing that we could do, and we feel safer. We also need to increase our coaching staff, and this is not something that we've talked a lot about. But as we have grown, we have more than 900 students in 8 through 12. When we move our 8th graders back, they're still in high school athletics. So that doesn't go away. Next year, our high school is going to be that much bigger again. We've added 175 to 200 students to our athletic program, and about 20 additional nights of supervision, and we expect that also to increase. One of the things that you'll see in the budget this year, we must increase our athletic trainer time. Right now, she's teaching 2 courses, and with the transition, we're able to give her back time for athletic training. Part of that is driven by, as you know, the concussion. We also have board policy on concussion. It takes a tremendous amount of time. Just to start the season, we do at least 400 impact tests, and then for every student that may have a concussion, they do another impact test. If a student has a concussion, it could be a 3rd one, and it could even be a 4th one, but usually it's 2nd or 3rd. And then on top of that are all of the other things that go along with that, as in managing their curriculum. If they're having cognitive difficulty because of a concussion, our athletic trainer is the one that also reaches out to the counselors to make sure that we're programming and planning for them. We also have sports like cheer. They made it to regionals this year. They didn't get to go because it was the same day as either the SAT or the ACT. But our cheer squad is not just an old-fashioned cheer squad where they dance anymore. They're tumbling. And we have got to give them some help. Lacrosse and football, again, I think everybody knows those are even high concussion sports. So as your sports grow, we have to make sure that the ratio is correct. Golf is a sport where when we cut in 2010, we left one coach. And that's an area that we try to never have one coach traveling with students, high school students, on their own. And so we need to fix that as well. When we look at compensation, this year what we've built in is a step increase for all staff, and we feel like that is absolutely essential. The one thing we want to do this year is do the 1% scale adjustment across the whole scale. Last year we reconfigured that and we were very focused in the middle. But as we've talked to the school board, talked to compensation, talked to peak, we're also migrating after the end of this year to look at that distinguished professional. And so we want to make sure that our scale is we feel good about where our scale is this year, and we want to do that enhancement across the board. We also are looking at health insurance increases. Actually just got a phone call about that today. City retirement increases. We're also adjusting our school health aide salary. And, I put that on there because it's not a huge adjustment, but it's a really important adjustment. As you know, we have the EpiPen, also legislation that came through. What we are asking of our health aides right now to help children with insulin, to be in charge of EpiPens, is far more than just putting a Band-Aid on a knee. And so when we had an opening this year and we couldn't fill it, we made a commitment from the staff that we have got to make sure that we're funding that position for the responsibility for the person who's in it. Some of the FY13 budget drivers, when you look at all of those, when the staffing that I had up there, hiring for current enrollment, it's almost $1.7 million. And it sounds staggering, and it is. But there's not one position up there that's either not mandated or that we don't need. We also have safety and security for $236,000, a step increase for all staff at $730,000. Health insurance increases are right now at about $128,000. This could double. We're hoping that it will not, but that's where it is as of today. The 1% scale adjustment is right under $300,000. City retirement increased this year at $53,000. School health aid adjustment is $26,000. We have a system-wide health. As you know, now that we have to have EpiPens at every school site, you also have to purchase those. Also, we have a contract with the Fairfax County Health Department. And then moving for transition. We built in money in FY13 to help us with all of our furniture and getting into TJ in May. In August, we also have another move where we're moving some 8th grade to MEH. We're highly likely moving pre-K to the trailers at TJ. And we also have to move all of our furniture in TJ that's down in the gym area in the summer while renovations take place back up to the building. That's the biggest expense. You're talking every single classroom and every piece of furniture. Our budget expenditure increase is 3.2 million, which is 8.5% to our operations. That's a little bit over where we were as far as our operational costs last year, but not a whole lot. And when you look inside our budget, some of the things that we're really trying to do this year, we want to continue to expand our hybrid learning. And with our finance and economics, again, it's a very economical approach and a way to offer the course for our students, but it's also very curriculum sound. We have students who want to take a really rigorous IB curriculum. So for those students that have a full schedule, they don't want to give up art or they don't want to give up band to take finance and economics. So what we're planning to do at George Mason is offer an approach that can be a traditional. If they still want to take it as a traditional elective, it's there for those students who wish to take it that way. If they want to take it as a standard hybrid, which means it's on their schedule, every third block they go to the hybrid, but it means they can rapid pace, they can go a little bit slower because it is online. Or if it's a student who wants to take a full schedule and take a semester and a half or extend and have flexible hybrid. And in flexible hybrid, it means that those students are doing check-ins at times like Mustang Block. So they're working through the curriculum, they're still working with the finance and economics teacher without impacting the schedule that they really want to take at George Mason. We're also continuing to expand all of our digital automation in our operations. I know this is not the exciting stuff, but it's what really helps us, again, put money back into the classroom and the curriculum. And this is Sarah over here. She's been with us more than 20 years. And these are all paychecks. And as you can imagine, the more we grow, the more paychecks, the more contracts, and we have not added staff to central office. And we've really talked as a central office that we have to change the way that we operate and operate more efficiently to make sure that we're putting money in the classroom where our children are. So how do we do that? And one of the things that we're doing is we're automating our system. As a matter of fact, they were in a huge meeting all afternoon today. Contracts, leave, attendance, recording, all of our benefits enrollment will be online. Substitute tracking. We have a program that we're actually going to drop that kind of was a good lead up to this program so that we have it all merged together. This is going to help us actually save on staffing in central office and cut down on the paperwork tremendous amount. And the people that have been here 15 and 20 years can't wait to get the system. We're also working to automate our facilities, all of our rental requests and our tracking. And I don't think people always realize that we have almost 500,000 square feet. We have a lot of property to maintain, and just keeping the property scheduled, and most of our buildings are all used 7 days a week, about 12, 15 hours a day. That's almost a full-time job. But the person that you saw that also works with our security and all of our grounds and overseeing facilities is Sevi Padilla. He also does this piece, so automating is going to really help that as well. We're also automating our transportation request and tracking. When your athletics programs continue to grow and you're adding more programs, you also have more buses going out, more scheduling, and again, it's allowing us to keep our transportation office smaller. One of the things that I'm excited about, and this is working with Mr. Palermo and Elisa High, our curriculum innovation assistant superintendent, is that instead of adding a traditional encore teacher at TJ, we have a brand new science lab opening this year. And so on the rotation, instead of just adding another rotation of music or another rotation of art, trying to get our classes smaller, we're adding a science specialist STEM teacher for that rotation. Again, it's mandated that we have it, but now our students will rotate through art, music, PE, and STEM. And we're really looking forward to doing some more robotics and putting some things at TJ that we haven't been able to do in the past. We're beginning our MYP training. We started informally, but we knew we needed to wait until we went through the formal transition next year. We had our first meeting today where we were working on our application that will go in April. Very excited to be starting this process. We're bringing the trainer to us, and again, that will be right when school starts, in order to be as cost effective as we can by bringing the trainer here instead of sending people out where you're not paying hotels and things of that nature. So we are full steam ahead for MYP, and I think you're going to be so excited. We'll do a presentation later where you get to see what MYP looks like now. It's changed. The new MYP just rolled out last summer, and it's very much about project-based learning, hands-on. I think at our middle school it's going to be very exciting. We're also continuing our technology integration, and again, during one of our work sessions, I'm going to present more on what we're doing with technology integration. We are so excited. We have a whole team of teachers at George Mason that are very visionary, that are really working on what they have wanted that model to look like as they've gone through this year. Also, one of the things that we're recommending is, now that we have a creative calendar committee, is exploring a year-round pilot for one grade. It could be first grade, it could be a transitional grade like second grade, so that we can really investigate a dual calendar system. And do we have families that actually would want to be part of a year-round calendar? And then targeting that class with at least 25 to 30% of those students that really need extended learning. It's very inexpensive to do it. And one of the reasons I wanted to put it in the budget, I don't know if anybody saw where LASSO did even the survey with their own students. And I was amazed at how many of the high school students all said they wish they were on year-round. Doesn't mean we're going to year-round calendar. What this means is, can we operate a dual system? A lot of places do it for those families to opt in or opt out and have a few sections. So that's just something we're exploring in the budget. That's very, again, it's not expensive, but it's a little bit creative and gives us something else to look at. Curriculum enhancements, we need to increase all of our reading materials. At Mount Daniel and Thomas Jefferson, their guided reading materials have been on hold for about 4 years. And if you are teaching a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old how to read, their books are about this big, and they're paper, and they don't last longer than 4, 5, or 6 years. And we have not been able to buy what they have needed to teach reading, and that's not okay. So we have that in the budget this year to get some of those guided reading materials, as well as increasing the site budget at TJ, because they're going to have a whole nother class full of students. We also are continuing our focus on testing and assessment to allow that real-time results. It seems like we just keep adding because everybody wants to add on the pre-K end or add on the high school end. So again, in our budget, next year we're fully pre-K through high school. And again, this has been driven by teacher request, where we are getting real-time results for our teacher in reading and math. Also purchasing world language and science textbooks at our secondary. Now, all of our different science, depends whether you're chemistry or physics or biology, these books have been bought at different times. But what I can tell you is when I looked at the list, and the oldest textbook on the list was either 12 or 13 years old, and it was science. That's not okay. Now, as we purchase textbooks, we're trying to also look at the ebook model. And so that, ongoing, we're being and Brian Harris is leading on that with Miss High, and we're really excited about that. But we also know we're going to need some hardcover books as well. So we're doing a blended model to make sure that we are transitioning well and not just saying we're going to go online and then all of a sudden kids don't have textbooks and they don't work. We're making sure that we're purchasing so that it's blended. Also, I think I said world language books. We also want to continue our dual enrollment partnership with NOVA, and we hope to continue to expand that. Our geophysics class is this semester. They're getting college credit and high school credit, and we're really excited. We tried a class last summer, and we just didn't have the enrollment for a math class because most of our students their math was a higher level than the course we were offering through NOVA, and we just didn't have enough enrollment numbers. We were willing to run the class with very small enrollment, but NOVA wouldn't actually run the class with small enrollment. But we're looking at expanding that. And geophysics is our class where we have a lot of students getting college credit. And that's really exciting because it's a different group of students who are in necessarily IB curriculum or full-time IB diploma, I should say. The other thing we're trying to do is make sure equity and access in everything that we do with technology is at the forefront. And we're putting a hotspot at GM and MEH parking lots so that when kids after school want to log on and do their homework and they're waiting on an event to start, they can actually get on to the network. And they can't, if you're a visitor, you can't get on unless we were having a special event. This is for our kids. They have to have on their school login. We're also putting a hotspot at TJ. And this is somewhat in an outgrowth of what we want to do with, I want to say Miles Tech, to say that correctly, with the post and the pole that was going to be on the baseball field that we haven't, Milestone, thank you, where we haven't been able, that hasn't come to fruition. But we do have students, and I can tell you that are in High C right now, where we are doing some loaner laptops because kids don't have access at home. And, while you can go to Starbucks and you can go to McDonald's and you can get on the internet, if you don't have money to buy a coffee or to buy, something when you're there, they'll let you hang out so long. And then we also do have the library in the middle of town. So depending on where you're located, we want to make sure that our kids have some access points so they can get on securely on our network. Also, Readiness to Learn. We're continuing our summer backpack and meals program. Last summer we served more than 2,000 meals. and we expect that program to continue to grow. And we'd like to add the book component. We did that with our summer school, but we feel like that's an area where we can enhance this year. We're also looking to migrate our MEH and GM food service program away from the USDA. And again, that's so we can provide healthier meals that our kids will eat. And we are already seeing since winter break, and since we have dropped some of those requirements that we legally could step back from, that our program is starting to trend back up. So we're very excited about that. When we look at the overview of the 14 budget, and this is some probably a little bit more of the heavy numbers after my tree grows. In fiscal year 2014, our goal is to reestablish a base to move forward for the future. And that is absolutely essential for us. We have to make sure that we are funding our schools adequately to be the very best in the country and to be very best globally. When we look at our historic per pupil transfer, and I just think that this is really telling, because this year what we will be requesting is right up in here, and we're trying to just restore back to 2007. Now, what I do want to say is we didn't pick a number, Mr. Kimball or I or Ms. High or any of the directors. We went through every single director's budget. We looked at every position we had to have, and this is where we landed. And because we're bringing you what we feel we really need. And what we really noted is if you look at 11, 12, and 13, what some people will say is, well, you tightened your belt. That was really where you need to be. But the reality was in 2011, we couldn't compensate our staff. And when we look at 2012, we did a mid-year step. But also what was happening here is what we're seeing, I think, with our request that's even at City Council tonight. We stopped our bus replacement because we were adding a route a year. It couldn't replace an old bus anymore. It was a bus to add for the growth and for the enrollment. We also stopped our technology replacement cycle. We have so many areas that are especially capital expenditures that we put on hold so that we could make sure that we could fund. And we also were very prudent with our fund balance, which meant that we didn't spend, if we had all of that money in our account, we didn't spend it all. But in doing that, we've also struggled. And this year, that's what we're seeing with our request to council, is we're trying to replace those capital items that we put on hold in order to help the city. And I think we did our due diligence and commend the school board for that work, because I think some very hard decisions were made. And this is where we are following this year, is trying to get back to 07. Class sizes also increased during those years. And I think that's what you're even seeing when I showed you all the 22s and 24s this year. We have to continue to get those down. When you look at this historic spending based on enrollment, you're seeing the same trend. This is our growth trend, and that's why it's green. And this is the funding trend. And this is the city transfer trend. And we have to change that trend. We can't continue to add more than 100 students every year. And going forward, we know the next couple of years, that's definitely what we're looking at. And sit at the same budget. You simply cannot do it and run an effective school system. When we look at our realignment of resources, these are some things that we've done. Last year, this number was even greater because we realigned in our central office. We've made huge staffing adjustments this year. We've moved people from one position to the other so that we didn't have to, in this budget, come back and ask for more. We have retirement payment savings. We have our retirement option that the school board supported last year and we put in. We're seeing that come to fruition this year. We have OPEB expenses that we're saving on. The other thing I want to point out that I think is very unique is that our community is supporting the schools. This daycare partnership, we're very excited about. One of the things that was in this budget, and then we were able to take it off, was playground equipment. We need some more equipment at MEH. We need some more at TJ. We need some everywhere. Our daycare is stepping up and helping us, and they're going to fund $100,000 worth of play equipment for our children. The other thing we don't want to forget is this community fundraising partnership. That's the foundation. These are all of our families that are raising the money for baseball lights and softball lights. And they're really helping our school division because these things are not showing up in our budget. And so when you look at that, it's more than $1 million just in this budget that our community and our staffing and planning. When we look at the change in the total budget, our operating budget request is 8.5%. Community service is staying flat. And again, I remind you, community service, most of that is actually the city rental for the community programs of our facilities. So it's kind of an in and an out number in that when they rent our facilities, they pay for their refs and we hire the custodians, but then they end up paying for that. So it looks like it's money that we get, but not really. In food service, we're expecting a decline in food service, but again, we're still working on getting that back up. This is the first year we've seen a decline in revenue ever. Our total recommended operating budget and our transfer amount, that's the number that looks really different this year. Our state funding is 5.3%, sales tax is 2.1%, and you're going to see again our federal funds are down, and of course that over the last couple of years, especially with stimulus, has gone in reverse. Sequestration, right. Other sources of funding are down 20%, and our beginning balance is down 79.3%, which means that we simply needed the money to spend on our children in our schools. And our total operating budget, recommended superintendent's budget, is $41,389,240. And again, that's an increase from last year of just over $3.2 million, or 8.5%. And when we look at the main drivers to the operational budget, and I kind of take you back to where we were at the very beginning, hiring staff is a huge portion of that. It's almost $1.7 million. And those are staffing positions that we have to have. Safety and security, $236. The step increase for our staff, health insurance increases. And even when you look at that, that leaves $466,000. And if you think about that $466,000, we still have to purchase new textbooks, purchase textbooks for student growth, electricity increases for TJ for that 22,000 square feet, the gas increase to run 2 more routes, facilities maintenance for elevator inspections, prox cards, felony checks, increase in office rent here, our computer replacements for our old desktops, furniture for our new students. We don't just have to have a teacher. We need desks and books and manipulatives and chairs, and it costs about $20,000 to set up a classroom. Also at our school sites, we have increases in paper with increase in students, copier maintenance, fax machines, printer ink, calculators, projectors. And that is just a very short list of all of the things that this budget funds. And what could change between now and as we go through the budget cycle, our federal funds, $46,900 would be sequestration, so that could change. City funding of the current request, because as you know, they have a request at the work session tonight and then an approval next week. And how they fund that and what they decide to do could change our budget. Health insurance increased with UHC, and that's a phone call we actually just got today. These are our future budget dates, and these are just the ones that are the closest, where the school board is actually adopting the budget on March the 5th. So that is our budget with an increase of about 8.5% in our operations this year. And that's it. Thank you.
Wow. That's right. Dr. Jones, thank you for that. And to your staff, thank you as well. I know that these was many hours of hard work, a lot of research and data crunching and analysis and evaluation in order to bring this forward. So I want to recognize that work as well. You see on the board the next step, which is a work session on January 29th. That first work session is generally where this school board brings questions to the superintendent and staff that we need to have answered. Kind of the theme of that is data collection and information sharing, so that we make sure we have everything on the table and understood, so that we can then proceed with deliberations. So if members of the board have questions they want to bring that evening, or even better, if you have things you want to send to Tony and the staff in advance, they could pull them together. Then we'll get together. On the 29th, Tony, is that in this room?
Oh, I better look at that one. I think so.
Okay.
I think our work sessions are all in here.
I think
Yes,
it's in this
yes,
room,
we
and I
wanted
think
to do
it's
it that way. Yes.
7 o'clock?
Usually 7:30, but
It's on the calendar. I'm just trying to remind everybody in the community who's watching this, so that they know to come and where and what time.
I'm sorry, we had trouble printing today.
It doesn't say on this
I
list
know.
anyway. Check the website, and you'll find out when that is. Members of the board, we don't usually ask her a ton of questions at this point, but I do want to open the floor in case you have thoughts, observations, things that you know now you'd like her to look for. Anything? Karen, anything? Mr. Lawrence?
Nothing that
Nothing, just as normal? Yep, okay. Mr. Rasmussen?
Oh, I'm just aching to get to the city letter, so no.
It's coming right up. Charlotte?
I think about it.
Okay, great. So Dr. Jones, once again, thanks, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from all of your friends here around the table before next Tuesday. All right. The next topic is the City Council's memo. And I forwarded this to all of you. In fact, I think Tony and I, within 5 minutes of each other, forwarded this to everybody yesterday via email. But I also wanted to put it on this board agenda tonight and provide this group with an opportunity. I wanted to make sure everybody received it and wanted to see if you had any questions, thoughts, if there's any discussion, and importantly, if there were any instructions you had for me or for our superintendent about this letter. As Dr. Jones mentioned earlier this evening, there's a work session with City Council tonight where they're discussing our request for additional funds. And next Monday on the 28th, they will give second reading and either approve or not those funds. And so with that, I'm going to kind of be quiet and see if there are any of my colleagues who have questions, issues, or concerns.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Rasnick?
Okay, so I'm going to try very hard, but I'm going to probably fail not to talk about how appalled I am by this letter. First of all, the two issues where they have asked us that some sentiments be conveyed from council to the board. The first issue discusses their expectation that we consult with the police chief on security issues. And the reason I bring this up is because it presumes that we haven't been consulting with Chief Gavin. And my understanding is there's nothing further from the truth. And so I don't appreciate even the sentiment that we need to be lectured by the city council or city staff on our support or collaboration with our city law enforcement. What I would encourage them to do is to concentrate on their own issues regarding the city's law enforcement staff's continued pleas to improve their own security situation at the council. So once again, it seems like we're having to do a little bit of a lesson for council on who runs what. And so rather than concentrate on what is school board staff, maybe they should concentrate on their own business. Secondly, the second provision, where it basically goes into great detail about our fund balance and their expectation that we somehow credit against our budget, is flabbergasting to me. I'm absolutely do not understand. We just went through a summer where we were consistently excoriated about fund balance. I'll even point to an August 9th guest commentary in the Falls Church News Press by a member of council, where they argued at great lengths that the school board had the funds to fund what at that time was our technology needs. And so, even though we said, be wary what you wish for here, because your own city staff has said, we like the carry forward provision, we like the city council, the school board to have some cushion in the budget. We know if you spend down against needs on this, that the next budget year is going to come with a higher price tag. We made that clear, but we had a need, and we adopted their own approach they wanted us to adopt. And now, it's almost like the scene in Casablanca, gambling, I can't believe it, you know? I'm shocked. So, it also, and this is the part that is ridiculous, it appears to put this idea that the request, which, by the way, is an attempt to increase security at our schools, which I think no one in this community is going to oppose, is somehow going to result in a 4-cent tax increase. However, once again, that supposes the same obtuse approach to forecasting that the city staff and council seems hell-bent to pursue, even in the face of yet another revenue forecast that shows 2.5 times the growth that they're just absolutely refuse to come off of. It's crazy. So I'm begging them, please, mind your business. We're trying to do ours. We're trying to do what's best for the kids. Don't lecture us. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rasnick. I'm going to pause here for just one moment and give the superintendent an opportunity to remind this board and the community who are here with us and maybe watching about her efforts and collaboration with the city chief of police on the security issue.
Yes, I met with Mary Gavin probably about 2 days after Sandy Hook, but I think even more than that, you know, we work closely with the city on every aspect. It's not even, when I look at security and safety, I'm not just talking about somebody that comes in and wants to shoot, or it's every aspect. And when we have something, whether it's a electrical, you know, issue, if it's a sewage issue, we pick up the phone and call the city, and they are so responsive. We have a great relationship with all of the city departments, and I think you've heard us say that this year because we've needed them. You know, we've needed them for safety issues that dealt with gas leaks and all types of things. We have a great relationship, and I actually met with Mary again today. Sevi Padilla and Mary Gavin have met several times as well. They've already been out, and we know we want to enhance our security and get our local enforcement more involved in some of our school aspects, because we tend to train with school people, and they want to know more about how we operate, and so we're excited about that, and they are too. And so they came out and brought about 10 of their officers and did a lockdown drill with us so that we can meet and we can talk. They did that, I think, about a week or so ago. But we have a great relationship. And so I was disappointed when I got the memo as well, because we really pride ourselves, and I think the city does too, in that we all get along and we help one another. And when we pick up the phone and call, you know, we have a great relationship. And so I was disappointed to see that as well, and felt that it was almost, for me, like it was trying to say publicly that we didn't get along. And we really do, and we have a great relationship, and we need them. I mean, our resource officer is one of us that's at our high school every single day, Steve Rao. So thank you.
All right, so it sounds like we've done our collaborative job and due diligence with Chief of Police Gavin on the security issue. All right, now getting back to what we were doing before. Ms. Howland, do you have any questions, thoughts, or comments on this topic?
Well, I'm just, it's perplexing to me then that this letter came from the city manager, and I know he's just basically conveying a message, but wouldn't he have shared some of that information with the city council? I know that you don't know this. You're not in his head. You don't know what the mayor, you know, what he has said to the mayor, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. Do you have any idea how that came about?
I can preside and give a little insight, and I did share that with our chair shortly after the meeting that we had previously, which I believe was last Monday, when we went to talk about that. We had asked to be there to talk about the fencing and to talk about our request to be able to purchase these items for the kitchen and the buses, and we were given a verbal directive, exactly what that says that night, Mr. Kimball and I. From the mayor. It was not, I didn't see it as a consensus at the council at the time. It may have been, but there was no vote or anything of that nature, but it was from the mayor.
Anything else?
No, not just yet, thanks.
Mr. Lawrence, do you have any thoughts or questions?
I really agree, especially with what Greg said. I mean, I find that the first part about not consulting was odd, because the council said it Monday. I mean, I watched the tape, and they also said it Thursday after we had left our joint session. They said the exact same thing, that implied not only that, you know, we weren't getting along with the police, but we were actively not seeking out their opinion on security issues, which just seemed very strange. So I don't know if we need to have somebody specifically asked the chief in a session because, I mean, she was there and she wasn't speaking up, but, you know, the impression was very clear that we were supposedly not even asking for help, which clearly was wrong. And the second part about the fund balance, I mean, to me, and I said this to some people today, it really struck me as, you know, a parent talking to a kid who, you know, had real needs, and so the parent gives the kid the money for the needs, not wants, and then says, but by the way, I'm taking out of your allowance next month. So the tone was not productive.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I appreciate your comments. Mr. Sharp, have you anything to say on this topic tonight?
I'd like to add a concern about council delivering, and in most instances on this issue, it seems to be a single member of council delivering edicts that are supposed to be representing the position of the city without any vote. They happen at work session, or they happen as a result of a single members meeting with somebody outside. Let me be a little more specific as to what I'm talking about. Mr. Kalin had a meeting last fall. This was actually the second meeting that he arranged with the leader of the Virginia retirement system. And he, apparently the council is considering tonight another document which purports to indicate some directives, this time going through most recently the city's retirement board, to convey that there are changes that will need to be made with VRS, and this is the way it's going to be. Both the meeting with the leader of VRS and the meetings that took place with the city's retirement board, there was no communication to us about those, no invitation for us to discuss them. I made a point of asking Mr. Kalin during a joint meeting last November that at least someone be notified, and I personally asked to be included in consideration of how these changes in VRS would be conveyed, not to try to alter the substance of them. That was not me. My fault. You know, not to try to alter the substance, but to make sure that there was sufficient understanding on both sides that indeed what was being done at the state level could be readily understood, and that all of our concerns could be addressed. And the result was no communication. And the ongoing result is that there's a meeting this evening where the council is in work session considering another submission, mainly generated at Mr. Kalin's request, to deal with VRS. Now let me be clear that there is some VRS impact on the city side. The constitutional officers are VRS members, so the city does have some legitimate interest, in some of their own city side staff people. It also certainly has an interest in overall funding. I don't argue with that at all, but the process has been abysmal, and I hope that can be remedied, and so very soon. Now, second thing is at our meeting with CIP, if folks will watch the final 20 minutes of the meeting, that after the school board members had departed, council proceeded to have additional meeting regarding the CIP and how it was going to roll out, and they proceeded to discuss whether an option for seeing whether Mount Daniel could be relocated to another site, specifically City Hall. They had discussion about that without school board members present, knowing that school board members had been dismissed for the evening. And there is a conclusion that one of them attempted to state in the meeting, this is a work session, and then restate in a blog post that you can find on the internet, that the council has conclusively decided that there will be no substitution of the city hall for any other project, apparently school or otherwise. And that the council has made up its mind. And I find that to be not the case, not the a fair reckoning of what council had decided, nor a fair communication to us of our partnership with them, what should be a partnership with them, over how we decide these things that are to go in the CIP or not. We need to revise the process in which we've been engaged. So I want to definitely say that I think that option is still on the table, still to be considered. There are great concerns about CIP and how all the various requests can fit within any reasonable fiscal forecast or circumstance that may lie ahead. I don't argue with that at all. But I do argue with the process as it's been practiced so far. And I hope that we can see a rebooting of that process so that we get better engaged and that the community gets better engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Mr. Castillo?
Well, I'm not sure which meeting of the city council I saw versus what's characterized by this meeting. The meeting of the city council that I saw concerning these supplemental requests was collegial, was positive, was supportive. The measures that were outlined were greeted receptively, and I thought there was unanimity. The meeting that was characterized in this letter was not, as I understood, a supplemental request for the fiscal year 13 budget, but it was an advance on the fiscal 2014 budget, where we were basically getting a loan, albeit not a payday loan at 24%, but still a loan where we're starting $1.3 million in the red. And so it seems to me, I didn't see or understand where that mandate characterized in Mr. Shields' transmittal appeared. I didn't sense that. I think it'd be interesting if you polled the council, if they agree with and the characterization in Mr. Shields' memo. But we weren't asking for an advance. This was 2013. And I frankly would not support proceeding on the council's terms. If they want to put the fence on hold with the consequences that may come down the pike, if they want the disruption of not buying a bus, then we'll roll it into the 2014. But I will absolutely not find it acceptable that somehow we're going to pay for these things that were characterized as extraordinary needs by cutting something else. And with respect to some of these more one-time outlays, how do you offset the purchase of the fence? How do you offset the purchase of the bus? Do you say, well, we were going to buy another bus this year and now we'll just not buy it? And with respect to personnel, how do you cut a person that you're getting supplemental authority to hire who is now going to be working for yet another year and many years thereafter? It defies understanding, and I felt that it was a hijacking of what looked to be a very normal and collegial process. Second thing I would note is the bizarre irony of this meeting really supports our characterization of the fund balance. And I'll leave that at that. And I think at the end of the day, I can't believe that the city council supports what Mr. Shields, I think, erroneously characterizes the council's sentiment, and I look forward to a clarification of that on more, I think, reasonable grounds, so that we can proceed and deal with the 13 budget with supplements as its own standalone budget, and the fiscal year 14 budget on its own terms. The only other thing that I would add is, at the meeting, the joint meeting of last Thursday, I think there was a great deal of sentiment about the great number of challenges that we're facing on a financial basis and affordability. And the only thing that I would say there is that it's not getting any easier if we wait 1, 2, 3, 4 more years. And I would say, from the city council standpoint, if we're going to be good stewards for the city's long-term future, and that really is what is at stake here. I occasionally despair during our conversations that we collectively may be seeing the beginning of the end of Falls Church if we can't get our act together, because it really is disheartening to hear that things may unravel if we can't do better. But I think the sooner we start to face the realities budgetarily of what we're going to be confronting over the next few years, the better off we'll all be. And I would urge that the city council and the school board work together to address the very real funding challenges that we have, which are not going to go away if we wait 2 or 3 years.
Thank you. Just once again, by way of summary and reminding to the community and this board, I've asked Dr. Jones if she would take a quick spin through the park and let people know what these extra funds we've requested are for. I maintain, as I did last summer with our technology request, that these are what would normally in a budget be called capital, not operating expense items, and they are critical to the operation of our schools. They're not frivolous. So if you would just please remind people about what we've requested.
We have, on our request, $100,000 that was for staffing. And again, this has been probably one of the most challenging years for staffing to make sure that we have the right teachers with the children that need the staff. Also for security, this is a fencing that would be very aesthetically pleasing. It would go around GM and George Mason. And this is really, when our children are there during the day, to be able to close the campus. And I think anybody who would question that fence, what I would encourage them to do is, at some point during the day, just park at Giant and look across the street and count how many people you see that are loitering outside our doors, that are all around that campus, that walk from the metro, come from Route 7. And not all of these are people who are of sound mind, and not all of them are people who are just going to the metro. And so we have known this is a great need, and I think that this year, more than any other year in public education, we are really focused on safety and security, and this is something that has been on our radar that we've wanted to do from the safety standpoint, from the staff, and we feel like it's essential to keep our kids safe. We also have cleanup and sewage, which that's not enticing or exciting, at $52,000, but we've had 2 major issues at MEH this year. And just to give you just one little perspective, every time you have something like that, you have to pay for cleanup. You also pay for the equipment that comes in, and then there's usually another contractor. And we've asked for $52,000, which is not the total amount. It's what we really need to be able to take out of our fund balance. And just the hazmat portion for the very first incident was right around $25,000, just to clean up inside the building. That had nothing to do with fixing the issue. So I just shared that one number because it's in my head because it was so large. Food service, we have $70,000 in food service equipment. We have an oven at the high school that is failing. Matter of fact, we had people from all over the country that were visiting our food service program just last week from the Governor's Association because it's one of the best programs in the country. And one of the things that makes our program great is that we don't fry. We have healthy food. And when you have an oven that's breaking down and you need to rely on baking items, it's a problem. We also need a tilt skillet. And a tilt skillet allows you to do things like soups and really, it's just like a big, large I don't cook a lot. So, pot. Sorry, that's
Just
not
like a big
right. You don't fry stuff in it. But they need that. They don't even have one right now at MEH. We are without one. So it's not like we're asking for additional fancy stuff. They don't have one right now. And it is impacting our menu. And one of the things we really want to do is try to make sure we're providing the best food for our children. We also need buses. And I think you even saw that in the presentation tonight. It's not that we haven't been prudent to put a bus in our budget, but what's happened when you saw that graph where the last couple of years we have tightened our belt, instead of putting 2 buses on there, 1 replacement, so you can replace a bus that's 15 or 20 years old, and then you would have 1 new bus for the route that you know you're going to have. When you're adding more than 100 children, quite frankly, you're lucky if you just have 1 route. We haven't been able to do that. So we haven't been replacing our buses, and that's one of those capital needs that, while yes, we might have been tightening the belt, it's been a struggle for us. So we need 2 buses to replace buses that are aging and breaking down, and we can't keep them running. And we need 2 more buses just for routes. So they're capital needs. And that's another thing, as Mr. Kimball and I brought these forward, the bulk of this is exactly what we understood last summer. That we were to bring requests for capital. And these are things that are long-term items that we need.
All right, thank you, Dr. Jones. I have to say that when Dr. Jones brought this to my attention over the weekend, she was a lucky camper that I don't shoot messengers. Because I wasn't happy. I was disappointed in it. I think this board has done an excellent job of being responsible over the past 5 years in its budgeting. And some here on this board, my friend Mr. Sharp, for example, would say overly responsible. And you have to have buses for kids. You have to be able to feed kids. You have to have staff for kids. And as we saw in our budget presentation earlier tonight by Dr. Jones, we have a lot more kids than we've had before. And so I think it's unfortunate that when we have come up with what I think is a request for only those things that we must have, and when in the past we've been told if we have these kinds of requests, we should bring them to City Council and they'll fund them, that we now have this. But that being what it is, the question I guess I have for my colleagues at this point is what, if any, action you would like me or Dr. Jones to take on this memo. It doesn't require any action on our part, certainly. We could just kind of keep it in mind as we go about our budget business. We could respond to it, or there may have other ideas. But I just wanted to put that in front of this group to see if anybody has ideas or requests. Mr. Sharp?
I think Justin's idea about requesting a clarification is very sound. And trying to get that as we get into their meeting on the 28th, so that we have a chance to address any questions that we can to help clarify things from our end, and also there are I know there were questions, for example, at an earlier meeting about the bus stop violations and whether there would need to be any actions by our school bus drivers in order to assist with the school bus stop violation ordinance. And so, it's that kind of thing that we may not have covered all the bases that we need to. I'd just like to be as cooperative as we can, but make sure that when we get to the 28th, that we have as firm an understanding with them as we can, and that they clarify what's the directive going forward, if indeed they intend to exact this reduction from us, which I hope will come out that this this statement that they've made here really needs to be revised, and that can be done in conjunction with what they do on the 28th, and not just leave it hanging. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, I do hope to I think that someone is at that work session tonight, and so hopefully we'll get a summary of what happens there at the least. But we'll see if we can't get some further clarification from them. Yeah, Mr. Castillo.
Well, one thing I forgot to mention was that in the course of that discussion of the supplemental requests, the police department seized $106,000 worth of property and sought permission to buy 2 new vehicles with that. I heard no mention on the part of council that the police department would be starting $106,000 in the red. And I think what's sauce for the goose should be sauce for the gander on that. I would say if the city council does not clarify their position, that we should either withdraw this request and make it clear that we're doing so because of the city council's position, and either request that the city council fund that out of the city's funds, make an appropriation not out of our fund balance, or we roll it into the fiscal year 14 budget request so that we can deal with it on its merits. But I do not want to walk into a situation where the city council is basically going to be looking for $1.3 million to sort of offset these requests that we viewed as supplemental.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. S.
So, I agree with most of your sentiment in that regard. The only thing I disagree with is that we pull the request, because I think it's, our paramount concern needs to be get the fence up, right? And I would propose a little different approach, and it would be this, that I believe we should have a, I don't want to call it strongly worded, but a direct letter from either the school board chair or the superintendent, basically indicating that we have, we're going to propose our budget as per our needs, that we don't intend to address any of this portion as they've described of lost revenue any more than we would ask them to replace the millions of dollars they've squirreled away into savings accounts or capital accounts or anywhere else while our city's infrastructure crumbles. So we may not have to get into a full, we don't need to lecture them any more than they've lectured us, but I think that a strongly worded statement that basically says we appreciate their letter, but I think it's fair that we need to let them know if it is the consensus of this board that we do not intend at all to balance any kind of cost reductions in our 14 budget requests. I think it's fair they need to know that. And if they decide to turn down this request as a result, I think you did characterize it correctly. They do it at their own risk.
Yes, you may.
I guess the only thing that I would disagree with on that point, which I think is largely accurate, is we're at a bit of a disadvantage because we're dealing with a response to our request that's wholly inappropriate, that a separate fiscal year 13 supplemental request has now been turned into a multi-year budget give and take. And so that's what I find so inappropriate, is the fact that this is even being floated by council in this fashion. And short of having them withdraw it, I fear that it will come down to that we're basically going to be. I think they should recognize the error of their ways. If they don't, I guess we'll deal with that when it comes. But it just boggles my mind that we're having this conversation, frankly.
Well, and if you'll allow me, I think you pointed out the important point at the very beginning. I'm not sure it does represent a consensus of the council. That's the part that I think is a little bit flabbergasting about the letter in the first place. So, I think the approach of basically telling the city manager, we appreciate your letter, we disagree with it completely, we're not going to credit our budget against this request, thank you very much, is a good way for us to see if it is a consensus of the council or not. I don't think it is. I think on the 28th that they'll approve this, probably 4-3, maybe 5-2. But we'll see if it was a consensus of council. I agree with you, I didn't see any of that from the last meeting. It may be the consensus of a member or two, but I don't even know where this is coming from, other than that.
Yeah, that is sort of my sense of this, and I think the whole exercise of telling us about this information that was given to Mr. Shields from somebody before they've had an opportunity to speak about it as a group, even in a work session, is so bizarre. I mean, so I wonder about our response. I mean, I suppose since the letter came to you from Wyatt, not really from the mayor or whomever to us, you could sort of say, we, you know, would like a little more clarification, or we'd like to hear what the council has to say, basically. Maybe we'd like to hear what their consensus is, rather than hearing a letter telling us that maybe they're gonna have a consensus, and maybe they'll tell us something about it eventually. It just doesn't make any sense.
Anything else? All right, what Tony and I will do is we will work on a letter. I think it's probably appropriate for it to come from me rather than from Dr. Jones, since it's going to be firm in nature. And I think what the draft will say quite simply is that we're in receipt of this, and we've seen the draft resolution online as well for Monday's budget. And that based on our view of the meeting, we're a little surprised. And that based on the nature of the request, which we view as emergency items, not as frivolous items, that we're surprised and that they can expect a budget from us that is what we need to run our schools, nothing more and nothing less. Is that fair?
The only thing I would ask that you potentially add would be some kind of recognition of the first part too, which describes any
Oh.
discussions we've had with the police department and Chief Gavin.
Yeah, will do. Will do. Do you have some good notes, Tony?
Yes.
Okay. I do. Good. So we'll draft that and we'll send it along on its way. Very good. Thanks, everybody, for your good thinking on that. That was really
Madam Chair,
very
could I
good.
just
Well,
add one
yes.
last point that, you know, if the city council wants to approve it, then let them approve it. If they want not to approve it, then they can not approve it. But I don't want to have this, you know, draft choice to be named later kind of exercise, which I think is inappropriate.
Player to be named at a later date. You're also a big fan of that movie? Okay. I think the last item that we have on the agenda this evening is the one that we removed from the consent agenda, which is daycare summer fees. And so, Mr. Kimball, is that to you? Dr. Jones, is that to you? Are we going to throw it over to Katie Clinton, who I see sitting back there with a smile on her face?
Yes, if I could clarify. Madam Chairman, I had raised this because of our systems being down. I don't recall receiving a report of what the change in the fees would be, or what, maybe there is no change, maybe it's just a continuation. So I'd just like to understand what the recommendation is, and as I said, I don't think it was on our website. So.
There was no website.
And yet I think a number of our parent folks would be interested to know what's our expected marching orders for the summer.
Right. So I think I saw this on board docs today. I think it got there late. And so let me just summarize that, and then if there are any questions, Katie, I'll throw them to you as the expert. And that is, it's a fee scale. The bottom line is 3% increase over last year. The scale runs from $16 for folks who are at the lowest income levels to $221 for those who pay the full fee, as compared to $15 and $215 in the prior year. The increase is reflecting the need to hire more summer staff because we have more kids, and in particular some special needs kids that require a higher staff ratio. There hasn't been a significant increase in fees for 3 years, so, and I wouldn't call this significant myself. And we expect a little bit of increase in staff wages, as well as cost of fuel, supplies, and field trip related fees. See, I can read that. Not that I know I can read it. So that's the situation with the summer fees for daycare. It's just a
And I would
a
move
small
to
increment.
approve the recommendation on summer daycare fees as presented.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Is there a second to that?
Second.
All right, very good. Is there any more discussion or question about that?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So I have just one question, and maybe Katie can answer, maybe the superintendent can answer. Every year this comes up, I'm always asking, is it enough? And it has been very low for every one of my years on the board. And now finally, since my kids are out of daycare, and I'm not raising the fees on myself or suggesting them, I'm sure I'll get beaten up for looking to increase it more. But I sort of a twofold question. Is it enough? I'm just blown away by the job that our daycare staff does. I know John served on the board there. They do a fantastic job. I'm stunned that we can do it this inexpensively. So I really want to know that Katie stands by this 3%. And secondly, I wanted to know if the board or Katie or the superintendent explored what I would call less of a regressive approach to the increase, that instead of a 3% across the board, something that which is fine if that's the approach that they think is necessary, but something that was, obviously 3% to someone in a $21,000 salary bracket is different than 3% to somebody making, $1.5 million a year. So those are my two questions.
All right. Katie, are you comfortable with these fees?
I'm definitely comfortable with the fees. We don't need a degree. We come very close at the end of each summer, and I really held it tight. I thought we need a little bit more wiggle room. We know that things are going to increase. After meeting with Hunter and going through that, I think we're very comfortable with 3%. Sorry that we can't raise it some more for you there, Greg. As far as the actual fee scale itself, we have revisited that a number of years and redid it 3 years ago to reflect more of the income within the City of Falls Church. So unless we're being asked to revisit our fee scale again, we certainly can. But I think we're comfortable with what we've landed with in the past few years.
Okay. I would just say for my response, because I was the liaison to the Daycare Advisory Board for a number of years, just prior to this one, and have been through a number of planning exercises with that group, that the program is exceedingly well run and financially solid. We began, I guess, 5 years ago to build an appropriate reserve for the program, and that is in place. And so if this Daycare Advisory Board and Katie feel like these are the appropriate fees, then I would support that every time.
Then I don't have any other questions.
All right, let's call the vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. And any opposed? All right, very good. The daycare summer fees are approved. I think the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Jones.
Yes, and I'll be rather quick tonight since I talked quite a bit at the beginning. We are doing some great things at schools, obviously. When I'm out and about, I think what I love the most is just the project-based learning that's taking place. And as a matter of fact, this week I'll be in one of the classes judging a competition again at middle school, and I did one I know some of you did as well just a couple of weeks ago. We also are at that point in our athletics programs where we're starting to look, playoff bound. I was at swimming last Saturday, which was delightful. And, it's just amazing to me. At the beginning of the season, we had 100 students who went out for swimming. And they went the whole season, they ended up with about 75. So that's just kind of a testament to really how our athletics programs are growing. I also just want to thank a few people. Richard Kane did an absolute phenomenal job with hosting people from around the country for the Governors Association. And I really think that his influence will actually be felt at the federal level because he pulled out some of the commodities that we are encouraged to serve our children and actually served it to the people from the Governors Association. We don't serve it to our children because we don't feel that it's quality enough. And so, but by doing that, he did that so they would actually understand that if you're in a school division where you rely on commodities and something like the catfish, what is it that you'd be serving your children? Just did a phenomenal job. He also had the pictures, which I don't know if some of you have seen those on our website, of the before and after hamburger patty, where it's like a hamburger patty in a little, one of those sliders that you get at somewhere. But really, he was so educational. And then also taking them around the kitchen and showing how he has that commitment to healthy cooking and having the oven. So I just commend him enormously. Obviously, we've had some technology problems I think everybody's aware of over the last couple of days. And I do want to, as difficult as it's been for everybody, we've had so many people that have really kept things in perspective, and it is technology and it is frustrating, but certainly we always look at the glass half full and not half empty. Things could be much worse. And we have such an incredible technology team, and I just want to acknowledge them because we had 2 of our staff members, for a while we were 50% down. One of our team of 4 was actually on vacation in Vietnam, and I don't know how many times he was called and responded to the call. He was on Tango, so it didn't cost him anything on his phone, but remoting in, trying to really help the situation because he's one of our top level techs. We had 2 technicians that Friday night and Saturday night did not go home to sleep. They stayed all night long, and they were on the phone Friday night with some of the providers as late as probably 12 or 1 in the morning until they finally got the really big issue resolved. So I just want to commend them because that type of dedication, you just don't find that everywhere. And to stay all night at your job, there are very few people who would do 1 night, let alone to do 2. So I just want to say thank you to them from the bottom of my heart because they've had a tough couple of days and they just need to be commended. So I'll leave it at that tonight so that we end with their kudos. Okay.
All right, thanks, Dr. Jones. And now, spin the dial. It's time for board comments. And I'm going to start with Mr. Castillo this evening. Do you have board comments for us?
I guess the only thing I would say to the superintendent is I look forward to hearing more about the technology issues. I work in that. I'm writing an article about the lessons from the derecho storm on the 911 system, and many large providers learned a lot of lessons the hard way. Redundancy, testing, backup, having information available. So I think I think in the end we'll look back at this as a good opportunity, and I think that we can build on this. I think in the end we did all right, and I thank everybody for working so hard and so diligently on what sounded like a very frustrating set of problems, and so I look forward to making as much lemonade out of these lemons as we can.
Thank you. Mr. Sharp?
I hope Mr. Castillo won't mind if I remind that he and I attended the IB Awards ceremony 10 days ago or so. And it was wonderful to see the very large turnout of returning alums who have benefited from that, and to hear the current IB coordinating leader at the high school describe all the advantages that these folks have been able to obtain in their higher education, which were conveyed to him in stories by the participants, and he related them back to the audience. Showed tremendous gain that our students obtained from that program. And of course, Mr. Lou Olam was there, and he provided some also, I think, very good comments in perspective, showing how the program from its beginning was had its problems in the sense that some students didn't accept it, some staff didn't accept it, some administrators didn't accept it. But once those things were overcome, there was great benefit to be seen from it, and the persistence and commitment that we've made to the program has paid off. And now I'm very happy to see in the superintendent's budget a MYP that indicates that we would be completing the program, and perhaps within Mr. Olam's lifetime. When we heard the CIP concerns of the council the other night, I was struck by the volume of requests that we have made, that the general government has made, the different departments of the general government, library, which I must apologize to John here that I was not aware, for example, that the there really is a very difficult situation as far as thinking about, okay, could the library go elsewhere? Because the library property on which the current building sits would revert to earlier owners if indeed that moved. So I apologize for not, I should have been aware of that from my council days. But anyway, the sheer volume of requests was very, very concerning. Right? It gets up to $150 million if you put them all together within a relatively short period of time. And there was, I think, a legitimate concern expressed as to whether the CIP desires would have a constraining effect on operational things that we otherwise might like to do. And so it has an impact. I hope Dr. Jones will help us through our operating budget and show us how we're taking those concerns into account. But I also think that the city has some things to do with engaging their community, engaging their staff, helping them to understand, okay, to what extent do we feel CIP needs should be constraining operating needs. They're, the third way out of that, of course, is at least one big way is more taxes. Another way is, and something we've shown some capacity at doing, is private fundraising. 2/3, or a bit more than 2/3 of our field lighting expense is going to be borne by private fundraising. And I think, that's not necessarily an indication that all of our CIP should be funded 2/3 by private fundraising, but it says that a substantial portion could be. And that could relieve the pressure to constrain operating if that becomes a substantial source for us. Lastly, I'll just mention that I'm scheduled to go to Richmond tomorrow for the VSBA's Legislative Day, and if any of you have clarifications based on something since our most recent meeting, perhaps Dr. Jones, as you've finalized your budget and your understandings of what that may mean in terms of our state request, let me know. I'll try to either get it to them tomorrow or get it to them as soon as possible. They're on a fast track this legislative session. And then next week, I also plan to be at the Federal Relations Network for the NSBA. And so we have some food service concerns, we have safety concerns, and potentially others. And we won't have the benefit of a meeting between now and then, but to the extent you can remind me of what our expressions should be based on our earlier discussions and things that we should at least be thinking about going forward. I'd welcome hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence?
Just a few quick things. Last week I went to the Band Boosters meeting, and they are very focused on their trip to the Lincoln Center. They have actually a fantastic New York trip planned, and they're doing fundraising. And actually the kids are asking to do more fundraising than even the Band Boosters had thought of, which was kind of funny. They're trying to be creative about how can we find something different to do, and I never realized there were so many different things you could sell for a fundraiser.
It's endless.
Yeah, and it was fun trying to find my way back to the band room. It was, let's just say it's interesting when you don't know where it is to find something that's not really marked.
Right.
I also went to the ESOL committee last week, and the good news is they're growing. I think we're maybe 1 or 2 people short, but it's so big that they had to meet in the MEH library because they were too big for the MEH conference room. We had the first meeting with the new students at you were all kind enough to agree to put on there. The first one's in 3 years. Both wanted to come. One had the flu. She still wanted to come and actually had to get talked out of it. Yes. Yeah, Gio, the one girl who did attend, said she just had to talk to Worry over and over and just say, no, don't do it, don't come. But anyway, so I think that shows the kind of commitment they've got to, what they asked to join and what they agreed to join, which is good. And one very strong shout out to Ms. High, who refuses to sit at the table next to me. At an earlier meeting, the ESOL committee had asked about a website specifically for the ESOL community. And they'd really expected her to bring, a skeleton structure, an outline, an explanation of what it could be. And in fact, she brought a website and showed it to them page by page. She's been working with, the IT people here to get easy translators that, do a better job than Google Translator used to do. But, and I think despite technology, hopefully you got, I think, a note from the chair just saying how amazing the job was that she had done, because honestly, they hadn't expected her to show up with a website. They just expected her to talk about it. So they were completely blown away by what she had done. So that was well deserved. And finally, Thursday, I'll be going down to VSBA for the annual orientation. So come Friday morning, I'll have no more excuses for asking all of you the questions I've been asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rasnick?
So a couple things. Karen reminds me of something that I should have brought up earlier, and I apologize, and if we can't do anything about it, so be it. But can I poll quickly the board how many people are aware of the recent bill that passed in the Senate on redistricting the Senate district that affects us now in some way? It was a very disturbing occurrence, and I have real concerns and would like to suggest that we amend our legislative packet to include our opposition to that redistricting. I know it's last minute, but it really is putting the entire legislative session in peril. And I think it's something that we as a board should probably oppose. I don't know if you know much about it, if anybody does, but basically the Senate voted to redistrict Senator Peterson's district, basically peeling off almost a big chunk of Vienna, Merrifield, and putting into our senator's district, Senator Saslaw's district, doing some other things. And they did it when Senator Marsh was at the inauguration, so it created a 20-19 vote that would pass. Even the governor was disturbed at how it transpired. Didn't say he would veto it, but he did say he was disturbed. So I would just suggest if we have 4 people who would be interested in opposing it, do we have that?
Here.
I must say I don't know enough about it. Would it change where the current representative for us would?
No, he would still be our representative, but he would also be representing Merrifield, Dunloring. So it changes the nature of his district, but more importantly, it imperils the whole legislative session. And it's clearly a gerrymandering grab. Every district that was moved created positive Republican numbers for those seats, with the exception of our senators, who, it's just been construed as a clear gerrymandering grab. And I don't really care about the politics one way or the other. I think it's a little underhanded they did it in the way they did, but I'm more concerned about imperiling an important legislative session where they're addressing things like school safety and transportation issues that could affect us and impact us, especially in terms of grants coming to us. So I would prefer that the entire legislative session didn't shut down over some silly politicking going on in Richmond.
And this is very current. This happened yesterday with apparently no knowledge or expectation on anybody's part, including the governor's, that they were going to take this action. And it feels to me like there will be questions about the legality of that move, or whether it's under the law possible for them to take as many huge steps as they took in the Senate yesterday. So I'd
say even if you wanted to abstain from it because you don't know enough about it, I'd really like to see it included as a part of our package that we oppose this legislation.
Yes, Mr. Lerner.
I'm just curious, how does this imperil the legislative session?
The Senate Democrats have stated that they will not do business. They'll basically shut down the legislature for the rest of the session if they'll continue with the bill.
They'll take up residence in West Virginia.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Go to Wisconsin,
We're going where
vote,
you can't find us.
legislation.
Your sheriffs won't identify with them. Yeah. 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 We'll let people think about that. We'll come back around to it. Is there anything else you need to share with us tonight?
Yes, just I still want to be hopeful. I feel like council has really look. Great schools cost money, okay? I feel for council. They hit the worst run of luck you could imagine. A big recession, a water fiasco, a situs fiasco, terrible weather, honestly, a tax rate that was artificially kept low, that kept the coffers pretty low. And so now it's time to pay one way or the other. And my concern as a board member is that we're either going to pay to have great schools, because great schools require great teachers. Great teachers in Northern Virginia cost money, and they should. Or we're going to have to pay by not having great schools. And I've repeated, and fellow board members have repeated, that's a bad investment. It's a bad investment in our home values from just the sort of pragmatic side, but from the moral side, it's a bad investment in our community. You know, we are a schools community. People, I mean, I don't understand why council shouldn't be saying, what can we do to make sure this is happening? And it is just beyond me that the approach seems to be find a way to cut. Let's return, for a community that's supposed to be progressive, where's the progress? All I see is like, oh, let's return back, reading, writing, arithmetic. Doesn't work that way anymore, folks. You have to actually invest. So I live in hope. We'll see what happens.
Thank you, Ms. Highland.
I wanted to add onto what Mr. Castillo had said about, looking forward to hearing about in more detail about the technology issues, and I wanted to add on the kudos to our staff. It's amazing the amount of hours that people put in, but also to you, Dr. Jones. I know that this was a major issue that you spent a lot of time on as well, so you deserve our praise, and thank you for, keeping the perspective and keeping, helping out with the contingency plans that have come up. A lot of no plan is perfect, but I think it was all in all what needed to be done was done. So I appreciate that. And I confess, I missed the athletic boosters meeting last week. I was traveling, I didn't make it back in time, and with all the technology issues, I never followed up on getting the minutes from the meeting. So I can't really tell you all what happened. So I will talk to our future fellow board member as soon as possible to get an update and get that to you guys by the next meeting.
Can I share something about the boosters that I forgot?
Yes.
Because I thought you may say it, actually. The boosters were really excited because, and Mr. Sharp reminded me of this, and I expressed to Mr. Horn that I would share that they do feel that they have found a naming partner for the softball, baseball fields with Bill Page car dealership, and are very excited about that and are working on that, and they'll be bringing that to us probably at the next meeting or fairly quickly. But that community support again, just huge. So I wanted to be sure and share that.
Wow, that's awesome. Anything else?
That's it.
All right, very good. I have a couple things I want to share. First, my apologies that I could not be at the work session joint with City Council last Thursday night. I'm so sorry. It's been such a long time. We've been trying to schedule it, and it was an important topic, but you didn't want me there, and I couldn't be there, so I'm sorry about that. I did want to share, just to remind people about a couple things having to do with facilities and capital that I just think are pretty interesting that I don't want people to forget. And that is that this school board has a record of being innovative and thinking out of the box and finding ways to get things done with facilities and capital issues. And I'm reminded about Mary Ellen Henderson, where we were one of the first in the state to use a public-private partnership to build that school, which came in on time and under budget. we return money to the city from the budget from that school. Second, the central office where we sit. This building was built in this city in part because this school board agreed to an early lease of the building, which allowed funding and financing for the building to happen. And that's exactly the kind of creative thinking that allows economic development in our town. And then third, as Kieran mentioned, was what our athletic boosters have been able to do with the community in terms of the lights. And so, I think at a time when we're talking about a lot of capital and facility needs, and there are those in our city who are poo-pooing innovative ideas and out-of-the-box thinking and creativity, this school board has evidenced on several occasions that can work. I want to thank the presidents of our PTAs, and I see Sean is still sitting here, for inviting me and Dr. Jones to participate in a joint PTA session over at Maryland and Henderson. Was it just last week or the week before? I can't remember. Gosh, time flies. But it was just a terrific evening, a chance to share with many, 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 many parents who came to that event what's going on with us and with our budget and with our CIP and those kinds of things. And so thanks for that invitation. I was thrilled to be able to be there, and I thought that was terrific. Moving along to materials for board review. There is reputed to be on board docs an audited year-end budget summary, but I didn't find an attachment there, so maybe that needs to be added. So take a look another day for that, but that is on board docs tomorrow. The other thing in terms of materials for board review that I want to point out is, there is a document there that has to do with retirement funding and the way it has to be handled by the city and that kind of stuff, which most of it went right over my head. But importantly, the city's second quarter and first half of the year financials are posted on board docs for the community. I think this was provided Monday at the work session, maybe, to city council members. And I just want to summarize that based on Richard LeCondre's memo, that it appears at this point, halfway through the year, as though there will be an excess of revenue on the order of $1.1 to $1.7 million for the city this year. I think that's it. Is there any other business? If not, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Mr. Resnick's
Oh, that's right. We're going to
legislative
circle
issue.
back to Greg's question about adding something to our legislative package. Are there 4 folks on this board who would support his request to add something to our legislative package?
I would be happy to second the motion if we can. I think the substance is that we want to convey our support for an on-time and fully inclusive legislative session, and that we would not want to see any single issue such as redistricting delay or prevent such a session from occurring. Is that fair?
That's absolutely a fair and accurate characterization of how I would state, I think, the board's concern about this measure. The measure could have been about anything. If it was going to imperil the session, I think it would be bad for us. So that's absolutely, like I said, I don't care about the politics of the thing. Personally, I disagree with it, but that's fine.
Okay. So that being said, are there members of this board who would support that? Yes.
I would.
Yes. Okay. Good. Kieran, if you'll work with Lila and Superintendent Greg
Sure.
to do that. Anything else? Thank you for that, Justin. I appreciate it. All right. In that case, we do stand adjourned. Thank you very much, and we will see you on the 29th at 7 o'clock, probably in this room.